Welcome to Talking in Stations, a podcast about EVE Online. I am Matterall here with a group of friends. We'll start with Elise Randolph.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? I'm happy to be here. Might have missed me the last couple of weeks, but I'm back.
Totally did. Also, we have Arsia, or Baleful Dysnomia.
Hey, good to see everybody again.
Nice to be back. Visiting us is Hateless and his cat. How you doing, Hateless?
Hello, everybody. How's it going?
He specializes in missions, and also everybody will recognize Suitonia. How's it going?
It's going well.
Awesome. He specializes in everything. And also McLeod is with us, and he's engineering in the back. So this is Talking in Stations. Let's talk about EVE Online in the past week. Probably the biggest news that we want to cover, and we'll just start with this, it'll almost be an open session on this particular mechanics change, is the Age of Scarcity in regards to ratting and NPC missioning. And that's where we're going to start today with the ESS changes, the Encounter Surveillance System, and the dynamic NPC, or what are they, dynamic bounties or something?
Yeah, the dynamic bounty changes where the ratting activity increases or decreases the amount of bounties you get in a system.
Yeah, so let's start there with ESS. I'm going to actually bring on one more person. Let's get him in here before this is jump in Tiberius. Oops. Yeah, so we'll get him in just a second. I think he'll be off camera, if I'm not mistaken. So it'll be Tiberius, who also does the Noikus Connection show for Talking in Stations. And he'll be on to give a wormhole viewpoint on some of the changes.
Good morning.
There you are. How's it going?
Doing well, thanks.
Great. Good to have you here. Okay, we're going to talk about ESS and dynamic bounty system. And let's just have a discussion about it. So where do we start? Does somebody want to explain what the ESS is?
Sure. So the ESS before the change used to be a optional deployable that you could put down in a system. And the idea of it is it's like a risk versus reward mechanic where it collects some of the bounties that you get. And over time, the payout increases. It also gives you an LP bonus as well when you kill rats. So the idea is that you would get more ISK and loyalty points overall, but potentially someone could come in and steal your stuff. But there are a lot of problems with it. For example, you could put it in like double spawned anomalies. So like it was pretty difficult for like random people to take it. You could also instantly scoop it. So a lot of people would like put it down with and like sit on it with like a cargo expanded malediction, and then you could just instantly scoop it and warp, and you'd like it'd be impossible to catch it or steal from it. So they're making it completely mandatory now. So every nullsec system is going to have an ESS.
Yeah, I think that's the important part, right? Because right now it's optional and you don't see it all that much. In fact, you probably hardly ever see it. But they're making it mandatory. So it's essentially taking a lot of the, austerity measures that have been hitting EVE Online. We've seen it through the mineral redistribution and mining and moon mining. That type of income has been nerfed already. But now it's going to another extent. It's going to the ratting income as well. So the ratting income is going to be, nerfed a little bit with the dynamic bounty system and with the ESS, assuming people actually go in and raid this thing.
So like what people have brushed upon, but I think one of the important points to make is that right now, as it stands, the ESS is something you can warp to in space. It's on the overview. And you can go and you can choose to steal the money that's been in it. And in order to do so, you have to stay in space for a little bit right around it, and it warp disrupts you. And this is going to be what's going to be in every nullsec system. Like, it goes into this bank, And people who come in right now, a lot of times when you're hunting a nullsec system, you're looking for ratters to kill. They'll immediately just warp off and dock at a station when people come into the system to try to get them, and they won't try to fight these people under any circumstances. But with this change, the people who are hunting them can warp to the ESS and steal the money. And if they don't come to try to contest the hunters will get a payday based on how much the people have been ratting, because they just have to sit in the bubble for a little bit and wait for a timer to tick down to steal some of the ratters' money. So it'll be a big boon to hunters and a big incentive to actually fight them as opposed to run from them.
Hey, defend your loot.
Well, the interesting thing is, and Elise brought it up, this was something that was a mechanic that you could deploy as an option. So you could make more money with more risk, and it was just an optional thing. But now CCP is changing that and saying, we're going to impose this on you. You no longer have a choice. What do you think about that change? Does that signal something? Because as you also said, these weren't used very much. So why would they take a mechanic that wasn't really successful and double down on it?
So I think the reason why it's not successful is because it does give that factor of risk, and it does give hunters a chance to steal from you if you don't defend it. Like, obviously right now they just scoop it and leave. But I think it's being introduced because it's a change that will drive conflict, in that you have to fight the people who come into your space hunting ratters now, or else people like me are going to make a lot of money, because if you just warp off and dock like you do now, I steal however many millions of Iskar in your ESS, and they move on to the next system, right? Because right now, if you roam through some of the more PvE-focused areas of Null, everybody just runs second. Anybody jumps into a system, and it's really hard to find content as a hunter, right? So it might not be the favorite bit of content for the people who are hunting, who are ratting, but it's going to be something that a lot of the game does like, I think.
It does seem really like hunter focused though, right? It does seem because, I mean, this is sort of two changes in one, right? It's giving that incentive you're talking about for defending your space, but it's also siphoning some money out of the system from ratting, right? So it kind of feels doubly hard if you're just a ratter, because your income level gets nerfed just because CCP are nerfing how that works, and now it's like someone can take all your stuff, and it happens in 3-hour chunks. So if you don't want to play for 3 hours, then you kind of have to like sit around or hope someone has your back, stuff like that.
Yeah, I believe you could steal your own ESS to pay it out if you decide that you're going to go to bed or whatever. But you will need to like risk your space, and I guess potentially that could be like some space drama, especially in some of these like like bigger corporations like Horde or Karma Fleet, where they kind of recruit everyone, and there's like normally like 5 or 6 different people who are running in the same system. So you always get like those like drama things, right, where some guy wants to go to bed and he wants to take the ESS, but then you have to like share it out and make sure everyone doesn't get scammed or whatever.
It's like tips at a restaurant, right? Like the waiters are all like, can you cash me out? And you have to figure out how to divide the tips among the waiters for that night.
It's going to be a mess, but it's a new form of AWACSing too. You just like get a blue vault, go in there, take the stuff. You're like, oh guys, I was just sleeping. All of a sudden you're stealing money from the other guy. But since we have tried... CCP have tried before to get something similar to this over the years, right? They want kind of roaming gangs to be going through nullsec. They want the invaders to be able to do stuff. So at one point, they actually had they moved all the structures from player-owned starbases, most of them to the outside of a starbase. So you could harass and make someone undock by shooting their infrastructure. Right now there are jump bridges that you can harass, but that kind of is a bigger force, right? You're talking more than 4 or 5 people probably to reinforce a jump bridge. Historically, they also put station services on the outside of stations, which was one of the wildest things, right? The idea was that if the station services were on the outside of a station and you just dock up, then someone can like turn off the cloning services or turn off the fitting services. In reality, that never worked out because they had so much HP. Those things are only ever reinforced while you were like reinforcing the structure anyway. So this is a nice, I guess, iteration on that philosophy where you don't really need that many people to go ahead and get this, go to this ESS.
It is to be noted that it's going to be, the ESS will be accessible via cruisers and above, so you can't just run around an interceptor and grab all the money. You have to at least be in a cruiser, which makes you as the hunter also catchable yourself.
I believe you can't be in a capital ship either, right?
Probably not. I think it's gated, right? It's
Yeah.
So you probably can't be in a capital ship.
Yeah, that's probably a mechanic that people aren't really aware of when they're reading this thing. They're like, okay, well, CCB put out a dev blog saying, oh, there are certain things that can't happen inside this ESS thing. There's a 75-kilometer radius, and when you're inside that radius, you can't warp, you can't MJD, you can't cloak, you can't light a cyno, you can't filament out, you can't do anything that like breaks the thing.
So,
but a lot of people were saying, oh, just sit at 76 kilometers and you're fine. You can just shoot into it. But no, when you go to the ESS, you land at a little gate and you take a little gate and it shoots you through.
Yeah, it's
like faction warfare.
It's literally that. Literally a faction warfare plex null, which, as somebody who was in faction warfare for 7 years, I have to say I approve. But like people are thinking like, who's gonna bring like capital ships to an ESS? Like, there was an ESS the other day that we were trying to steal from, and a Naglfar came up and scooped it from us. So people bring capital ships to an ESS, yeah. So the gate is a welcome change.
It's also an interesting dynamic too, because you can maybe bring like a slower brawling BC or BS. So you could just bring a Hyperion or something and go inside, and you don't have to worry about getting like dropped on. You don't have to worry about a super coming in and killing you. Don't have to worry about getting like tackled by like 2 interceptors that you can't do anything about. And since there's no, or you don't have to worry about like nano orifices kiting you forever or something, you can just like chill on the beacon and hopefully get a fight. I mean, maybe you'll get blobbed by like 20 Feroxes coming in or whatever, but like you'll probably, if you want to get that kind of brawling fight, maybe it's like a better environment for you.
100% agree.
100%. Maybe the Chronos will be great again.
So like, the thing is, in Null, most of the fights do tend to be like kitey nano gang or like even the fleet doctrine, it's like mutants at 70, it's like jackdaws at like 90, it's Ferox at long range. There's not a lot of brawling in Null, and that's sad because brawling is fantastically fun. And one of the reasons why it happens more often in faction warfare low sec is because of the complex, the ways they're set up, and Null is getting its own kind of versions of complexes here, which will lead to a new type of PvP style that doesn't happen a lot in Null, happening a lot more.
Or people will just take phantasms, right?
Or because you have the because the bubble scrams you, and a phantasm has the afterburner. It's a micro warp drive.
Yeah, potentially I think that it could be abused by nano gangs anyway, though, because what you can do is you can put like a cruiser inside the plex while you camp the outside.
Yeah.
So you could have like your normal doctrine or whatever with a bunch of sabers or whatever on the outside, and then you just send like one guy in a cruiser to go and take it, and then you stop them from getting in. Or if you're like in a nano gang, you can just nano on the outside while you have like a cruiser guy go in and take it.
But like that can be balanced by like the outside of the gate, the local forces can warp in their capital ships and their overwhelming force, right? So if you want to avoid like the possible overwhelming like capital force, you can take the gate. And if you have a choice of whether or not you want to play the nano gangs on the gate or not.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how CCB balance that, or if they have. I'm sure they've thought about this possibility before of just putting bubbles all around the ESS, or just a cloak dictator, and when someone looks like they're going to come in, just decloak, drop a bubble, and then all of a sudden you've got any force you want to camp your thing.
But,
because obviously in FW there are no bubbles, right? So you can just, what they did is they made the the beacons, like you could warp in at 100 and still activate the gate, so you can't really camp it too well. I'm not sure.
The thing about the Phantasm, though, and the Nightmare that can also probably get in, is even with the Afterburner bonus, they land at 0 on the beacon if somebody's already camping the beacon, right? You put a bunch of webs right there on the beacon and grab it down the second it comes in.
Or now you have the web bomb, right?
That's not going to be what's used.
No.
Right? Like you're not going to put like a 30%. You're going to put like a Vigilant or like a Vindicator or something right on 0.
You can't get a Dictor inside anyway.
Yeah, you can't get a Dictor. Yeah, that's a good point. It's not a cruiser.
Oh, have they announced specifically which ships you can use, or
cruiser up, right?
Cruiser up and then battleships down, basically. So anything that's a sub-capital that's bigger than a cruiser that isn't like some weird like mining ship like an Orca.
So cruisers, cattle bruisers, and battleships.
And is the web bomb is that specific to Dictor? Okay.
It loads in the same probe launcher that launches the interdiction probes. It launches.
Can a Hick do that?
No, not yet. Maybe CCP will add it, but it will probably be overpowered if it was on a heavy interdictor.
Yeah, so. Hicks use a different module that can be focused with scripts instead of the probes. Because right now it's a probe. It's like warp disruption probe and bubble probe, like stasis web fire probe.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I think CCP, there is another mechanic that maybe CCP made to try and like address people just like taking it with like a guy in a cruiser. Because there's also, in addition to the main bank that you can still film, there's this reserve bank. And the reserve bank is actually like an AoE still, which is kind of weird. But basically, there's a reserve bank that can only be accessed with a specific key. And CCP hasn't actually said where we're going to be able to get these keys from. And and they're not going to be, the keys aren't actually going to be in the release of the ESS as well, which is kind of weird. So there's potentially like going to be like a massive gold rush.
Yeah.
Because if you have like, if the keys come out, let's say 2 weeks after release, and suddenly like all of these like ratting systems, like in Oasa and Esoteria and whatever, they might have like 2 weeks worth of bounties like stuck in them. So that could be like, 2 or 3 billion worth of bounties.
So
it could be a lot more than that.
Like the thing is, that's going to be on purpose. Like I think that Oasa and like the whole Dronelands up there are specifically kind of targeted because they're not like some of the areas that have like NPC space that you can kind of never get kicked out of. So they're right now very, very safe regions to rat in. So I feel like this is something that's going to drive a lot of players towards them specifically because they're going to be like, there's a lot of money being made up here. I want to go hunt up here. Because people are going to be driven to areas that have a lot more money in them being made, right?
Yeah, it synergizes really well with the filaments too, because the filaments can take you up to some of your like closest friends, like 15 of them, to
25.
To the most populated systems, or the most active systems rather. So you can filament from Jita all the way over to Oasa pretty reliably, and just have at these banks and then come back.
So URMB put together this entire thing. Basically what he's going to do with his corp idea that I mentioned a couple days ago, they're going to go get Podfin standings, and they're going to use the filaments to yeet out to random places and hunt places and to get the ESSs. And then what they're going to do is instead of trying and get that back, they're going to yeet back into the Podfin region. And then if you get into a certain system in the Podfin region, then you can yeet back into HiSec.
So that's something that I've heard the idea tossed around. Like, it does mean that you're going to be in Podfin waiting for your timer to go down for 15 minutes, and that might not be a problem. Yeah. Like, but between stuff like that, like you have that option. You have Theraholes. There's public Therahole bookmarks. There's all sorts of options to get back, right? Like, honestly, myself, I carry a depot and probes. So even if there's not a Therahole close, I can usually get back faster than it would take to yeet to Podfin and then back to a minor victory with the filaments.
Yeah, but
you got-
it creates new bridges that
Yeah,
are around, and it makes it a lot better for pilots. And with it being easier to get out to nullsec to go participate in this activity, it makes it more accessible and more people will be able to participate in it, and that's fantastic.
100% agree, because it is just another way of getting in and out, or getting out specifically in this case. So you have a bunch of options to return home after your hunt if you don't go out in a blaze of glory.
Don't forget about drifter wormholes. They're, in my opinion, I feel like they're a underrated mode of transportation. If you have all 5 drifter wormholes mapped out, you theoretically could reach all the different areas of the game in large respects, and in a very limited or very little amount of time, because each one of them typically contains anywhere from 25, even upwards of 40, depending upon the spawns, different wormholes. And a vast majority of them end up being nullsec holes a lot of times. And the ability to force project with those wormholes is pretty useful.
Oh,
And
definitely.
you could definitely, I would imagine those are going to see more traffic as time goes on.
Definitely agree on that one. And they're spread out around the cluster, like where the observatories and stuff are, so you can often find an unstable wormhole or unidentified wormhole to get into them.
And
do you
Hateless,
think CCP is going to address like asset safety? Because like one thing that I think a lot of people will do is you'll steal from an ESS and just like dump the ESS tokens into their citadels, and then you just asset safety it out.
yeah, that's kind of a busted mechanic, right? Even if you don't own a citadel, you can deposit the stuff at it from the outside.
Yeah, then you just asset safety it, because that's also like part of part of the ante, right? Of like having, if you're trying to hunt down people who already stole from your ESS, there's an incentive, right? Because if you kill them, you can like take back the tags that drop if they drop them. But if they can just like asset safety it out, it kind of makes it like less there's less, I guess, rewards, right? If you like hunt down and kill the people who are like terrorizing your space.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the most broken mechanics that people don't really realize how broken it is just being able to deposit stuff into a citadel you don't own from the outside without docking. It has so many weird broken inner implications to it too. We talked about this earlier in the year when the abandoned state to citadels was happening. There's several groups in high sec and low sec, I guess, but mostly high sec, that'll go through and map out citadels by putting like one shred into every citadel. And then you'll get an email or an eve mail when that citadel is going through the unanchoring process or when it's going through abandoned state. So you have like a living, breathing map of citadels that are becoming unanchored. So if you anchor a citadel in high sec and go to unanchor it, chances are one of these guys is going to get a mail, go and steal it before you can. Or if it goes abandoned, they know when it's going to go abandoned and they shoot it and get all the stuff out of it. But one of the things that Hateless mentioned that we didn't really, that people might not be aware of, is he mentioned Bjornby's new corp called the Bank Robbers. Bjornby started a new corp, and it's open to anyone. So if you're listening and you want to get involved, or if you've gone on a Bjornby fleet before, you can just put your character in, and I think it's already quite large.
I was watching him earlier today. He's up to 120, 140 members.
Yeah, there you go. And so his entire purpose is going to be just taking public fleets out, and they're going to go to these ESS or go to these nullsec systems, pillage the ESS, hence the name Bank Robbers, and then come back. And he's got different ways that he's going to like get back safely. But it's a hoot. I really love the idea, and it reminds me of the Alliance Phoebe Freeport Republic. Yeah. When the Aegis or when the Phoebe Sov system changed and a lot of people dropped Sov. So a lot of like new different types of PvP play are coming out, and Bjornby is one of them. So you should give him a look.
So PvP though, that's what I want to key in on. This to me feels like it had a reaction from certain players that are saying, wait a minute, you're forcing me to fight. You're forcing me to PvP. That's not really fair. I just want to socialize with my friends and do a thing that's more or less relaxing. What do you guys think about their position? Because that's a lot of nullsec, right? A lot of that therapeutic.
There is
so
much content along that lines in this game.
Yeah, like I think that if you don't want dangerous space, then null and low sec aren't the space you want to be in.
So I would actually like to chime in with this. I had Izuki, who is a former CSM member for last year. We actually talked about this in the last episode of the Noikas Connection when we were discussing Poshven a little bit. This kind of falls in line with what CCP has kind of changed in what Izuki was describing to me is that in his opinion, they've changed away from this like entirely sandbox notion to more along the lines of like 80% of the game is sandbox, but we're going to try to drive a narrative to an extent. We're going to try to drive the game the way that we're going to, I guess, maybe nudge it in the direction that we want, and we'll make little tweaks here and there in order to try to get it to where we think that it should be going. But yeah,
it's more than a nudge.
Right.
This is like a shove.
Right. It could definitely be perceived in that way. But yeah, that's not. I don't think CCP is trying to. Is going to allow the game to continue as 100% sandbox as it has in the past.
Is such a big point that is not really emphasized, because we look at this as just a mechanic change and what's going to happen with my income, and everybody's hyper focused on the actual thing. But philosophically, we are shifting from a sandbox to a video game, to like an arcade game, aren't we? Like,
well, I mean, I think in general that's true, but not so much with this change. Like, I think the most obvious change that's shifting away from the sandbox is like the PvP arenas, the proving grounds, and
even the filaments as well.
The fast fun, basically.
Right.
They're trying to make it easier to jump in. One big issue that I've always had with PvP, I'm almost purely a Care Bear, but the biggest issue that I have with PvP, every time I go out to do it or every time I try and participate in it, you'll get a fight every now and then you struggle to find a fight. Like you can sit there for 2 hours and not end up getting anything, and it's like, this isn't fun to go from gate to gate to gate to gate to gate to gate to gate. Oh, there's somebody, he ran.
Yeah, and that happens a lot. Finding a fight is, especially in a lot of regions in Null, finding a fight is the majority of the time when you're hunting.
Well, so somebody made a decision, or some group made a decision that was a bad thing. Suitonia, you're somebody that PvPs a lot, right? You stream, you chase people down, you look for fights. What do you think of that? Having to look for a fight?
Yeah, it's really hard right now. Basically, the only way you can really force people to fight you is if you like tackle a ratter or something. And like even then, right? Like it's not really fair for the ratters in a way, because like there's no way a ratter has any chance of killing you, like 1v1.
Right. They're set up to do something else. So when you tackle them, they're not ready to fight you. They're doing something else. But you trigger their alt or their friends to come and help them against you, that sort of thing.
This will cause 5 to 10 man to 15 or 25 man gangs to be roaming around looking for ESS loot. Like, that's what people are going to do. And the fact that there's fleets undocked roaming around that don't care who they shoot, we're going to see content, and it's going to be great.
Yeah, I think there's been a big like gulf in EVE for like small to medium gang content for a while. Like especially since like since the Citadel expansion, like a lot of the ships that are ratting or mining that are worth killing are capital ships where you need like 50, 60 people to be able to kill a Rorqual and fight like, you know, like a 50-man gang that comes out to defend it. Or, you know, you can kill ratters, which you can do by yourself solo. So there's not really much point of roaming like with more than 2 to 3 people to kill ratters. So hopefully this means there'll be a lot more like 10 to like 15, 20 man gang opportunities.
I was gonna say the null static community and the wormholes, wormhole dwellers. So that's like C3 nullsec and 2.5 nullsec groups are. I think you're gonna see a lot more of those groups roaming around because they typically operate in 5 to 20 man gangs. And I 100% think we're gonna see an influx of players who are interested in joining those groups and an influx of activity from those groups.
Yeah, somebody who also does the like 5 to 20, 5 to 30 people in a group, in a fleet. I also think that it's going to be a good change.
So part of the sandbox, this is what I was getting at. Part of the sandbox is a trade-off, right? Like you get to PvP. Like if you get to impose PvP on someone like me that's a Care Bear in nullsec, then I get to impose time restrictions on you. In other words, it's going to take you a long time to find where I'm at. That's part of my defense. And if I hide, I'm going to discourage you. That's part of my defense against you. So it seems to me like that the very limited defense that PvEers have in nullsec, they're diminishing their ability to respond in that way.
I think that it's not limited. Like they did the trial with the blackout with the local being removed, and people really didn't like that at all. I think this is another trial of going in a different direction for the same idea, because right now people see exactly when somebody jumps into the system and they can just immediately leave. They're probably pre-aligned and there's like almost nothing you can do about it if they're paying attention.
On top of that fact, you load local before you even load grid, sometimes upwards of 5 to 10 seconds.
So like you have a pre-aligned ratter who is just watching for any local spike, warps off to a citadel, docks. They tried removing local and people couldn't take that. So they're trying to go in a different direction. You still have the opportunity to leave right away and dock and be safe. But now the people who are looking for a fight actually get something instead of nothing for hours on end.
I see. So you're like a lizard. You get to leave your tail behind, but you get away.
But aren't we worried a little bit that this is going to bring back a lot of groups and like 10, 15, 20 man roaming groups? Like this is going to provide the content for them. But isn't the natural reaction to that is, well, if I'm a ratter, I need safety in numbers, so I'm going to join the biggest group out there that has standing fleets to come save me. So if I have an option between breaking out on my own and doing something small with my friends, I'm not going to do that because now there's this huge target on my back. I might as well join the biggest group out there. So doesn't that just force more people in nullsec under the same umbrellas?
I think that's a double-edged sword, because if you're like one of 5 people in a pocket in deep in Syndicate, you don't light up the map that much, and you're not going to have the biggest bounties in your ESS. Hunters might be focusing on the places that are going to have the biggest bounties and going to have the most lights on the map in their area. So it's still kind of a defense to be off to the side and smaller, whereas people might go straight for Oasa for the biggest bounties. As said before, people might go for the Horde and the Goons and the Test that have so many people ratting and so much more money to take.
Yeah, CCP.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. CCP have been muddying the waters in the last 4 or 5 years, even longer. In the sandbox, like I guess they've been pushing sand to one side and saying, "Hey, play with this." So, like the PvPers, they were forced into also doing PvE activities, right? So when you saw the transition of R64s and moon minerals into an active activity, right? It couldn't just be like, I'm a big PvP army, I get to take this area and protect it with my PvP ability. It became, I get to take this PvP stuff, now I have to do a PvE activity. I've got to mine, I've got to go in the belts with my Rorqual, I've got to do this to build up a huge cache. So I guess this is the pendulum swinging back. onto PvEers, saying, "Oh, you've had so long to just be PvEers. Now you have to do a little bit of everything as well."
Yeah, and I think this also ties back into the dynamic bounty system, right? Because
Yes.
if all of you do is you say, okay, I'm going to join the biggest, baddest group. Well, they're going to have they're going to be making half as much ISK anyway, because their space is probably going to be like between 50 to 70% like dynamic bounties. So even if you're by yourself and you get your ISK stolen from the ESS, so half of your ISK you keep and half goes into the ESS. If you're ratting in 120% system that no one else is ratting in, even if like some guys come and steal your ESS, you're actually still making more money than like the guy who's like under like a big super umbrella in Oasa or Delve or wherever.
That's a good point. There is synergy between the ESS and the dynamic bounty system, the DBS.
Let's explain that a little bit for people that aren't stuck under rocks. What's the dynamic bounty system?
So the dynamic bounty system is another change that's coming, whereas the more people rat in a specific area, the less money is paid out for ratting in a specific area, whereas playing in areas that have fewer NPC kills will get you more. In addition, PvP activity in an area also increases the amount of money you'll get. So it encourages people to spread out and go where other people aren't ratting, and it encourages people to go where maybe PvP has happened or defend their own area to drive up the PvP rating.
Yeah, and it can go as low as 50%, or it could go as high as 120%. So potentially, if you're ratting in an area where no one has ratted in, you can make like 20% more, and like more than double, I guess. Some guy, if he's like just running his carrier or whatever in like a super contested system.
So in low activity, they're saying that it's going to return to flat 100 or base. And then in higher activity where ships are dying, so say somebody builds up a big stockpile, there's a fight over the loot, ships die, that would bring the multiplier up. It'll bring it up instead of just having it sit still. And having the fights for the loot will increase the bounty in the system. So if there's more people looting stuff, there's more fights happening here. It's good.
Yeah. So the stasis is 100%, but you can raise it to 120 with activity, PvP activity, and that sort of stuff. Or you can drop it by over-ratting the place, but the stasis is 100%. That makes sense?
Yeah. So if nothing is done, if it's bonus at 120% and nobody's ratting there, it'll go down to 100. If it's low and nobody's ratting there, it'll go up to 100. But for it to go above that, somebody's going to have to fight in that system to raise the multiplier.
So it seems like the ESS provides the opportunities to cultivate your soil, like to turn the soil over, because you can, let's say you're over ratting an area and people come to steal your ESS. If you go and kill them, then you're preserving your percentages on the ratting that's happening anyway, right? Is that kind of how it's?
Bingo.
Yeah, how they work off each other. So what Bjorn B might be providing is like nitrates for the soil that he needs. He might be bringing that.
Like the way I kind of see it is that right now, or historically in the past, nullsec, especially in large groups, have had the ability to make extreme amounts of money compared to other areas of the game in relative safety, compared to like low sec, or they don't have a lot of the struggles that wormholes have. They don't have a lot of the piracy and activity that low sec has, and they have been left alone to make absurd amounts of money that has kind of got us into this predicament we're in right now. And as I said before, the pendulum's just swinging the other way. Like, if it was supposed to be safe, it wouldn't be called null sec, right? Why is it safer than low sec?
Well, I think the people in nullsec would argue that it's safer because they put in the infrastructure to make it safer, right?
Well, it's also safer because you can kick people out because there's fewer things like NPC stations. You're not right next to a trade hub. The distance away from the Empire space and the fewer, like there's NPC stations in like Delve and like Fountain and here and there places close to like NPC null or places close to a low sec. But overall, like they do put in some work. They do put in a lot of work, right? But it's not the only factor.
Yeah, and one thing you just mentioned is really interesting. With the resource distribution change, I think a lot of people speculated that a lot of like big alliances might decide to move closer to low sec. Like they'll be in like low sec, null sec border systems like Providence, Delve, Gemini, Cobalt Edge, those kind of areas. With the new ESS changes, like because those systems tend to have higher PvP activity because you obviously have more people roaming in, like explorers and stuff like that. Do you think that that also pushes more people into like, going into these null-sec systems that are close to Empire space? Because there's less incentives now, I guess, to like, live in the middle of nowhere, like Omist or like Tino or somewhere where you're going to get less PvP activity, and also your bounty value is going to go down because because there's not going to be like as many people disturbing the Radders there and stuff.
I think we'll have to see exactly how it plays out, right? So they seem to be left a lot to mystery and surprise, and I guess because they don't want people gaming it before it comes out, right? But let's just say, like, if you live in MTAC O, like right now, no one rats in MTAC O. It's just an entryway into nullsec, and it's a pretty big one. But what if like killing people there, just gate camping and stuff, increases inflates the amount that you can earn there? Then suddenly people are going to be ratting there. And it kind of creates this, like, as Suitonia mentioned, it brings people out from the fringes of space to areas where there's going to be more interaction.
Right. The best ratting follows the most PvP interaction, which makes it a dangerous prospect. But if you can balance that, right, provide safety for yourself while you rat. So what kind of dynamic is going to develop there? People providing safety for themselves while they rat in very hostile systems where a lot of people die.
It might be like Horde standing fleets, right? Because like Horde used to rat in like BWF all the time. Like it was very easy for you to just jump into BWF and go to a haven and tackle someone. But there'll be like, 5 to 6 like Jaguars and trash frigates landing on you in like 20, 30 seconds, which is like one of the reasons why they're going to Horde space in BWF was really fun when they were there. So I think maybe you'll see like more like, less like renters where they don't have like any kind of standing fleet and they just dock up instantly as soon as someone comes, and more like people doing it kind of like Horde where you just have like 20, 30 guys who live in a system and they're all on like comms together, and you have like 3 or 4 radders out, and as soon as they get tackled they like W up in fleet and then you warp a bunch of people in.
Rat in groups with PvP fits and kill people who come along the way. I mean, it sounds more fun than just ratting to me.
Well, that's the important thing, right? To you, it sounds more
right. Yeah,
fun.
I'm obviously like allergic to PvE, and I say that after putting thousands of hours into the Triglavian event. But sometimes you gotta drink that medicine.
I wonder if like it has to be really well done too, though, because if you can artificially inflate the multiplier by how much you earn, or at least bring it closer to 100 by just killing ships, there's going to be a point where someone just manufactures ships, throws them into space and kills them to increase their multiplier, right?
Yeah, we were thinking...
It depends on how the Dow is tuned. So if it's really sensitive to ships exploding, or if there's almost never activity there, it might be, some systems might be more sensitive than others. But it depends on how sensitive it is to that influence as how big of a deal it's actually going to be, or if that's even feasible. Maybe you'll have to spend hundreds of billions and big things to make that multiplier go up, and it wouldn't be worth it. Maybe if you sneeze at it, it's suddenly 120%.
It would be stupid for it to be the number of ships destroyed in an area makes that thing go up.
Get out all the ibises. Let's do it.
You just destroy all your garbage. But I think it'll be a lot like the bounty system, if anything, where you can only recover a certain percentage of what you destroyed or was destroyed in the area, something like that.
Yeah, or like in FW, when you kill someone from the other faction, you get loyalty points based on how much their ship was worth, but it's also capped as well. So you can't just like kill someone's freighter over and over again like Goonswarm did back in the day.
Oh, sometimes items get really overinflated for their actual value, like the Pakvan filaments recently. Like we killed a Loki and Rarivos that showed up on Zkill as like 5 billion ISK because it had like 3 filaments in the cargo. They're not that valuable, right?
Well, I think it's based on 3 months, and since those are new, it's only based on 3 days.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it was, right? But every so often there's not kind of like caps and stuff put into place every so often, there would be ways to just jack up the level with some ingenuity.
So Elise, is renting going to change, do you think? Because the value of territory is going to change.
I mean, I would suspect that renting becomes even more popular, right? Which is probably the exact opposite of what CCP intends. And I could be horribly wrong here, right? Whenever you try to guess what an EVE player is going to do, you are probably going to be wrong, because EVE players are really wily, they're unpredictable, and they'll min-max things the best ways that they can. They're some of the best at doing that in any game you've ever seen, which is why I'm still here and why I love EVE. But like, here's the thing: if you're a ratter and this thing happens to you, you're not going to suddenly become a ratter / PvPer. Like that, you're not going to change the way you play. Some people may. That's a possibility. Some people may say, "This is the push I needed to get into PvP," but they were PvPers before; they just didn't know it. So these people are going to say, "Well, I want space that's secure, and I don't have the ability to secure it. So I'm going to go to someone that can secure it for me," i.e. have standing fleets and stuff like that, right? So you're not just talking about when people go into the ESS and kind of rummage through your stuff. Those people then stay in the area, right? They go from gate to gate. So the standing fleets can kind of wipe them out or just keep them into one specific area. So I would suspect more people that are more casual, that are more that want a PvE, I think they'll still join these renter groups or join like bigger groups because they want that extra. They want to be under an umbrella that they can't provide for themselves. Even if it means they have to spend twice as long doing it, it's twice as long for 100% chance of you getting it rather than half as long for a 70% chance of doing it. They'll do the math and they'll be like, after time, I'll just spend a little bit more. Like, who cares?
Yeah, the umbrella is essentially a police force, right? You want cops on the beat to take care of people that are bigger than you so that you can do what you're doing.
Yeah, you're in a way kind of paying for Concord, if you want to put it in like the most abstract way you can, right? You're kind of paying to make the nullsec areas as much like highsec as you can, and you're getting more out of it.
Right, because you can harvest more in nullsec, more dangerous space. And
so your day-to-day income will go down with this change if you're a ratter, right? But it'll still be higher than if you were to move to highsec and run level 4 missions or something. Except for unless you're as good as Hateless is, right?
Unless you're the Mozart of missions.
Then he's been out-earning everyone in nullsec forever anyway, so...
Well, there are missions in nullsec that you can make, like you can make bank off of the pirate missions in nullsec.
You can bank in nullsec mission.
You can make bank in wormholes.
All right, let's go through how to make. Yeah. Let's actually move into this area. This will be fun. We'll move into nullsec specific income sources and talk about how to make money in nullsec as it might change. This is something that you're familiar with, right, Hateless?
Not so much. I have an idea of I have the knowledge but not the understanding is how I'm going to say it.
All right, nullsec specific income sources. This must be McLeod's writing here then. Misunderstood. Well, let's just read this list off here. Nullsec specific income sources: mining Arcanor or Bistot. Those are asteroids.
Is it Bistot or Bestow?
We'll take Bestow. That sounds French, right? we just call them A, B, and C, right? I think that's what it used to, just the ABCs of mining. Okay, drug gas mining, supercapital production, pirate anomaly sites, pirate escalation chains, higher end level DED signatures, pirate missions and NPC null space, and higher level Sancha incursions. You guys have any thoughts on those?
So there's a lot of ways to make money that don't involve just sitting in a haven and doing stuff. It just so happens that the other ways require a little bit more work, and honestly, I think are a little bit more fun, right? It involves exploration, kind of going around looking for stuff. That's always been my way that I've wanted to make ISK, mostly because it's the best ISK per hour. Because you can get a pretty big payday from these things, right? Just explore, get lucky with an escalation chain, and then get some nice X-type loot and just flog it.
So,
yeah,
you know what? One of my favorite ways to make ISK and nullsec is that nobody's going to expect. Stealing enemy R64s when they forget about them. Because Initiative used to have a whole bunch of R64s in Syndicate. And I used to help out all the little guys that lived in Syndicate, and I used to be all blue with them before I joined EM. And every so often they'd have something, or where they'd forget about their moons, or we'd be able to harass them in EU time zone when they were trying to mine them, and we'd be able to suck up all of their moons overnight. And we made so much money mining Initiative moons, and it felt like PvP to me, right? I got the same kind. I'm a PvPer. I'm not generally a miner, but I was multi-boxing coveters and stealing Shining Xenotime, and I was like, yeah, this is exactly like killing your ships. I'm taking value from you and putting it in my pocket, and it felt like PvP because that Athenor wasn't ours. We couldn't dock in it, right? But there were NPC stations in a lot of the systems, right? Because it's Syndicate. So there's a lot of opportunities to make money that are overlooked.
Technically, PvP is player versus player activity.
It's definitely PvP to steal other people's moons.
Yeah, when we think of PvP as pew-pew spaceship against spaceship combat, but there's a larger definition of player versus player, and it can be in the markets, it can be in activities, as you just said. But one of the coolest ways, I think it was Puppet Hunter, CCP dev said, if you're running away from somebody, that's player versus player as well. If you're avoiding them, if you're trying to get past them without dying, that is also PvP.
Oh, definitely. I agree. Avoiding people is definitely part of PvP.
This is why I call Katya Say the best PvPer of all time, because she went around every system that Eve has to offer and didn't get killed. So I don't think anybody can say that. At least someday you will. At least someday you'll have circumvented the whole New Eden.
Hardcore mode. If you
getting killed is the fun part.
Okay, so what is the overall view of nullsec going into the future with scarcity now, not only in minerals but now in ratting as well? Do you guys have some predictions?
I think CCP is from the outside looking in, and I wish Caleb was here. Maybe he could talk on this a little bit more. I honestly think CCP is shifting the null commodity, the null market, the way they make money, away from just pure ISK and back onto commodity-based markets. So, we're talking like plexes and, running DED sites, certain level sites, and, essentially just grabbing the loot that can be valuable. And if a certain type of loot doesn't, becomes less valuable, then you move on to something else, either mining or, running these sites or chasing down even rarer drops like officer modules or something of the sort. That's what it seems like to me, that CCP is kind of like the overarching theme is they're moving away from ISK. It's the right word I'm looking for here. ISK flexibility and more towards like a commodities based market.
In other words, instead of just collecting potential for having gear, you actually have to get the gear or trade the gear or buy the gear or make the gear instead of just having potential to buy everything you need whenever you need it.
Right.
And in other words, having a thick wallet compared to having a bunch of assets in your house, it's a different way of living. You have less flexibility. You have to make more decisions ahead of time.
Right.
So rather than making money out of thin air, which is what ratting is, you literally just wisp it out of thin air. You're not making anything for anybody. You're not providing anybody any kind of service. You just are wisping ISK out of nowhere. You're going to have to provide the community a service of some kind, being producing an item to aid the community in the entire engine that is EVE Online.
You guys have other
I get the vibe that CCP are kind of unhappy with what happened to nullsec, right, over the last probably 4 years. I think they probably view a lot of players who would be happy in high sec but just moved to nullsec because it was making more money. So they're high sec players. They just happen to be in nullsec now. So I think they want to kind of push them back out, which is a hard pill to swallow because they're making like 5 times as much as they would be in high sec.
Well, a lot of them went to WoW, right? WoW Classic, because when Blackout hit, WoW opened up, said, hey, come play this game again. And there might have been a migration of a good 20% of players that were like,
nostalgia out the ears.
I mean, isn't there an old saying that's kind of mean, but there's an old saying that's like when a player leaves EVE and goes to the WoW, the average IQ of both games increases. It's a little mean. I don't say that that's accurate, but that definitely used to be a meme.
I think CCP just want to make nullsec a little bit more like the Wild West. They probably feel like it's a little bit too civilized now. All the changes that they've been doing over the last year and a half kind of seems like they're pushing it in that direction. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's just my take on what they're actively trying to do.
Yeah, they've pretty much, I mean, you could tell that they were trying to do that with Blackout. It went too far. It was too heavy. It was too burdensome for players. And it essentially didn't work. We didn't have, I think what CCP's conclusion was, one of the devs said, we don't have those players here anymore. Like Blackout doesn't work with the players that we have these days. Like there might've been people that were like, oh, hot dog, I'm coming back to EVE Online. Finally, they got rid of local. Let's do this. And they came and arrived. And then there was, not a lot of activity for them to participate in. Those players that came back to the game might've been the players that Blackout would have worked for. But like the population they have now, they kind of said that it doesn't really work for them.
Yeah, I wonder if they looked at the Blackout and they're like, well, we're okay with some of these guys just going somewhere else, just not leaving altogether. And that's why they're doing what they're doing now. Because, I mean, if you look at the ESS and the dynamic bounty changes, this is all stick, no carrot if you're a ratter. Like if you just like to rat in EVE Online or do PvE in nullsec rather, your life got demonstrably worse gets demonstrably worse with these 2 changes. Like there's nothing there's nothing to sweeten the pot. I feel except unless you go somewhere else.
Yeah, I almost wrote an article on this, and I was going to compare this whole era, starting with Blackout, with 2008 real world financial breakdown, where people they said, look, this is how you make money. It's an easy, here's an easy 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you're in the money trajectory was, and people started studying to be, financial bankers and that sort of stuff. And it doesn't just ruin that whole collapse, didn't just ruin the industry for the people that existed in it. It ruined everybody that was planning on existing in it. So it was like unfair for people who were still in college saying, I was wanting a career in that, financial sector. So this is what I feel like Blackout was to CCP. To some EVE players was like, hey, I'm on my way to my first Oracle, and you just took it away, or you took away my whole plan, my whole future. So there's got to be a lot of pain involved in switching things away from, you know, the way it was figured out before.
I think when CCP did the resource redistribution, like town hall type thing, CCP Goodfellow, I think, kept saying the carrots are coming, the carrots are coming. I don't know where they are or where they're going to be. Like, there's a bunch of carrots. Like, this is a huge carrot for people who like the PvP. And that's great. It synergizes amazingly well with the filaments, which I think were probably the best change that CCP has introduced in the last 10 years. It's such a neat little thing where you can go out and take from these ratters. And so that's a huge carrot. But where are the carrots for these guys? Or is it just like they've had a carrot for the last 3 or 4 years, and the carrot is you're taking it away and throwing it to someone else?
One big point of this, or one big thing, is that not only is this a carrot to current PvPers, but it's a huge incentive to get into PvP and for new players to go out and have fun, and that's good.
And a way to
That's
make
really
money
good
with
for the game.
PvP. It's a way to make
Bingo.
money with PvP.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big thing too, a way to make money with PvP, because that's oftentimes the drawback has been, especially starting out, that it's a little bit too expensive to get into unless you're already established and unless you already have like a big stockpile of money.
But they're experimenting too with drops, loot drops, the percentages of things that drop. Right now it's at 90%. It's only for a few days, but it's an experiment.
Well, that was the same as last
It's
year.
a Halloween thing. Last year's
yeah.
100%.
No, I know, but they use
Last year was
events.
100%, but then people killed like haulers with tournament chips in them to like pad their kill boards and stuff.
Silly stuff. You didn't do that, did you, Suitonia?
No.
No. Surprisingly, the who abused it the most was like a Corping Goons, I believe.
I mean,
That's
So
That's
one
surprising.
really cool thing about this time is if you're trying to learn an activity and you don't want to lose all your modules, right now is a really good time to learn it, because when your ship blows up, you're more likely to get your stuff back. When you're learning a new burner mission, or learning how to do an anomaly, or learning how to do 10 out of 10s, or whatever you're doing, it's a really good time to learn, because you're going to get your expensive things back, and it's a good time to make mistakes and
That's a
learn.
so
funny way of looking at it. Insurance.
So the thing about that change is also it's a really good time to get ganked in high sec, because we've had a couple high sec wars going on, and we were trying to go after Hell Dawn one night, and every time we'd like land on like the Savala Gate at New Dama, there'd be like a bunch of catalysts warp down and kill a freighter. It's like, split your guns, free fire on catalysts, like get on some of those skill mills, right? And it was just like constant, because the calculations change when the drop rate is 90% as to what's affordable, like what's profitable to gank, and
Right.
this is not the time to haul stuff in your freighter.
Spoiler alert, they did the math and everything is profitable. So just don't go through Udama. I don't know if you guys have like seen it, but also because of the way the map changed, Udama is like one of the only ways to get from Amar space to Caldari space and Galente space. So it's this like weird choke point of a 0.5 that everyone's just been killing everything that goes through there. Like, I've seen ratting ships, I've seen just Tech 1 ships, people just get bored and shoot them because it's so low effort to get everything out of it.
Well, the idea though is that they're using events to experiment with balance, and then they can take what they learn from events and move that over into balance passes for the game. So they have, let's say, a 40% drop rate right now on loot. They experiment with the 90%. They look at how many more people play in this arena, how many more people participate, and then they say, let's move that 40 up to 55. You know, this is, I think, how it works right now.
Oh man,
yeah,
that graphic.
So that's not only what I think, but that's what CCP Rise and CCP Fozzie said on some of the CCP streams that are going. And yeah, a lot of people are. I love that idea though, Hateless, where you're going out and using it as insurance, as a recovery, as a method of recovery of what you own. in burner missions and other missions and stuff.
Doesn't work for the Abyss.
No, it doesn't work for the Abyss. You don't get your loot back unless you're flying destroyers or
Yeah, you have a friend to pick it up. Yeah,
frigates,
you have a friend
and you're
to pick
lucky
it
and you still clear the site even though you lost the ship. That does happen, and getting your loot back in that situation is fantastic.
So the Abyss is one thing that I think is a huge. If we could go long on the Abyss right now, I think we could.
Well, the Abyss is another, like, taking it away from the sandbox and putting it into, like...
So that's good for people that want the content. That the big complaint about routing right now, or with this change, is I don't get to do the calm thing that I want to do. I just want to relax and do a few sites and have a good night. That Abyss will provide that activity, and it's a way to separate yourself. And in a good safe spot, if you're not known to be running Abyss, you go in a random high-spec system that's not crowded, and you go make a nice little bookmark, nobody's going to find you.
But there's been a new tier of Abyss, too, that C6, you can farm...
I'm not getting started on it.
Yeah, like you can farm that as a way to make money that's not at risk, right?
Yeah, so the ESS doesn't come into play in the Abyss. Dynamic bounty system does not come into play into the Abyss. The whole abyssal PvP area, it's harder PvE that kind of trains you in a sense on how to react in a PvP environment. But this is going to be the big winner, right? Because like your havens are going to make way less ISK per hour, even if you did it in absolute safety. You can do like T5s and T6s in the Abyss for way more bang for your buck.
I would actually argue contrary, because a lot of the value in abyssal sites is now focused, that I have noticed in my own experimentation, a lot of the value has shifted away from the NPC sell order red loot, which is the stuff that you can sell immediately for ISK, and back into the commodity value. So on the first iteration, I remember it was a lot of red loot and a little bit of the commodity value. And I think that was just because of the way that it was introduced. They wanted the commodities to be high, which is the isogen and the whatever the red goose stuff is called. I can't remember whatever it is.
Condensate, yeah.
Yeah. So now on this next iteration, I have noticed that a lot of the value in the T5s, T6s, and even pretty much all of them actually has been shifted more onto the commodity value. And the more that people run these, of course, the lower the value of the commodity is going to be, especially now with a bit of an interrogative here, especially now that since the Tech 2 Triglavian salvage has been completely moved over to Poshven, and a lot of that stuff was made to, a lot of that value comes from Ikaturses and Zarms, which a lot of wormholers and small gangers use. It could drive the value even lower depending upon the volume of what happens with. So go ahead.
No, so I just want to really echo the point that you made about Pochven. Like, I was just thinking, like, I think they're going to push people towards farming in Pochven, because right now, as it stands, the loot for both the Tech 2 Triglavian ships and a lot of the EDENCOM ships is spiking in price, because since the invasions have ended, there's a lot fewer sources of it than before, and a lot of them happen to be in Pochven. And there are very obscure ways to get things like DE, DLP for the EDENCOM ships, which I think are only in the fortress systems in the flashpoints that spawn irregularly. And a lot of the Triglavian loot, like you said, has been moved over specifically to Pochven, but with the standings being what control whether or not you can move around via the gates in Pochven, even though the wormholes have been fixed and now you can get into specific systems. A lot of people in Pochven aren't shooting the Triglavians because they want to be friends with the Triglavians to use the gates.
Right. So this kind of circles back to my point, that kind of echoing what Izuki had said on my show a couple weeks ago, which is that the CCP is kind of shifting away from a full sandbox into more of a driving force behind a narrative and the way that they want the game to go. And I also believe that this is kind of doubled down on with that. It seems to me that CCP is kind of focusing the economy more on a commodities market rather than an ISK liquidity market. So I think that there's going to be more value in commodities than there is going to be in having, liquid ISK.
Well, I do think that and specifically to the Tech 2 Triglavian stuff, I think a lot of the spike in that value of that kind of loot is a direct result of CCP disincentivizing the EDENCOM players from going to Pochven because of the whole standings bit with the gates. And I think Pochven itself so far has been a completely dropped ball. But in general, like if there's no reason for the people who regularly go there to kill the Triglavians, if you're incentivized not to kill the Triglavians and locked out from the very, very powerful mechanic of using the gates, there's going to be a lot less loot from killing the Triglavians when that's the only place to get it.
Well, eventually the value of the T2 Triglavian ships will go up and people will be incentivized to go do it. It just there needs to be at least some kind of faucet for that loot to come out of.
Well, it's already going up, right?
It's gone up a lot.
Yeah, it's gone up a lot. So
it went from like 100, 250 million ISK. They're like 700-800 million ISK now.
Right. So I don't think it's that high anymore, but it was for a while. In order for me to buy one of my Doctrine Icatersas, my guys had to shell out 1.2 bill, which was, I think, at the height of what it is. I think it's now sitting at, most wormhole-based Doctrine Icatersas are sitting at anywhere from 800 to 900, and before, they were at like 400 to 500. So that's just in the value of the hull itself. So I think that there's kind of what Hateless said. I think that there's definitely going to be a drive for somebody to try to find a way to make an efficient machine. Because like Elise said, when CCP or anybody tries to guess what an EVE player is going to do, a lot of times they end up falling short because they don't have the, a lot of EVE players are really smart. So they're going to find a way to not necessarily game the system, but to min-max it the best that they can. So, I think that eventually there will be, we will see some way of getting in there and doing it efficiently. It may have to be teams, where they have to leapfrog things through back and forth. But I definitely think that we're gonna see that happen at some point.
So, Suitonia, the Triglavian space, has that attracted you at all? Are you in Pochven at all?
Yeah, I am right now, actually. I was trying to grind up the standings, try and get to 3.0 standings, so then the way I can access all of the systems except for the 3 home systems.
What are your intentions there?
Just to make it more convenient for me if I am roaming in space, because what I could do is, I think someone mentioned it earlier on the show, is I can just use a Triglavian filament to teleport back to Triglavian space, and then you can go to there are some certain systems, if you use the proximity-based ones, where you can almost always guarantee that you'll end up in high sec. So you basically have like almost a null sec to high sec filament in kind of a roundabout way. And most of the Pochven systems are really safe because they have Freeport citadels in them, or a lot of them have NPC stations carried over that are being converted by the Triglavians. So it's like a super easy way actually to get back to K-space from null sec, which wasn't like, you still had stuff like Eve Scout, but now like it's really convenient for like solo or small gang PvP basically.
So they've recently fixed the Pochven wormholes, the C729s that connect via high, low, or nullsec that's close to where the system used to be. So if you have something like Skarkon that's at the edge of Molden Heath that used to be connecting it to Ethereum Reach, you can have a wormhole that spawns on the outside on the Molten Heath or Ethereum Reach side within 3 jumps of where the system used to be. And once you close it, it spawns in another one of those systems. It's like a static from the outside. So you can reliably get into systems, like specific systems you want in Podchfen now, since the wormholes are working. But you can use this to move around, like Suitonia said. If you can guarantee a high sec wormhole from a high or low sec, like some of them you can guarantee a high sec wormhole because of where the system is. So you can get right back to high sec just by gating to that system if you can gate. If you can't gate, you can wait the 15 minutes and do what Hateless said, which is use another exit filament, because the filaments don't require standing.
And when it comes to grinding the standings, there was kind of a really popular thread on Reddit when the Podchfen first came out. I was like, it would take you like 400 hours or something, some ridiculous amount to get the standings. What's that look like now, to the time investment to get to 3.0 standings with the trigs?
It's been significantly reduced. I can't accurately describe what it is, but I think it's, from what I have heard in my chat channels, has been like it's been reduced anywhere from a third to a half. So I mean, there's still a significant grind associated with it, but it's not nearly like the same ridiculous level as it was before. And I believe it was, if you did it for if you did it for 40 hours a week as like a full-time job, I think they said it would take like 3 to 4 months or something like astronomical like that in order to access.
So now it's just 1 to 2 months.
Yeah.
Now it's still really, really bad, I would say, and especially if you're starting from well below zero, like some of us here are. Right.
So Tonya, you're doing this, right? You're trying to get that standing.
Yeah, so I figured out like a pretty efficient way to farm it, kind of, but it's still really slow.
Okay, we'll talk after the show. Don't tell everybody. So it's still, no, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Yeah, so what I'm doing right now, I finally got to 1.0 standings actually like a few hours ago. But what a lot of people are doing actually is what you do is you get a ship that can just kill the NPCs from far away. Because a lot of the drone ships and EDENCOM ships are basically useless outside of 100 kilometers. Like the Kodari Navy NPCs literally can't touch you outside 70 kilometers. Neither can the drone NPCs. Like the only dangerous NPCs in Podchfen actually really are the Triglavians, which, if you have positive standings to, they shouldn't shoot you unless they bug out, which they almost always do because Podchfen is like super duper bugged for some reason.
For the record, the EDENCOM ships are what give the highest standing because of the relative faction sizes. So shooting EDENCOM is the best way to get Triglavian standing.
Yeah, so what I was doing is, the way the standing mechanics work is you get the standing gain from both. You can get a standings boost from killing a rogue drone and also from killing an EDENCOM in the same 10-minute cycle. So what I was doing was I was just using a filament to get in to a border system, because those are the ones with the 1.0 gates. And then what I would do is I would probe out the wormhole, and I would make sure I shoot an EDENCOM and a drone NPC in the system, the best ones that I could find, like battleship, or a drone battleship, or some EDENCOM battleship like a Raven or whatever. And I would take a wormhole out and then use another border system filament to go to the next border system, and then that way I could get standings gains like every 2 to 3 minutes. I did experiment a little bit with using like a vigil with like 200 kilometers. And what you can do is you can like paint a rat and basically go AFK, like orbit 200 kilometers. And if that rat then like dies to other NPCs or a war post or something, if it like decides to warp to one of the disrupted gates, you'll get the standing gains from it. But it was like really, really slow. So, I mean, from my estimation, it's still going to take me like 50 hours of grinding this to get it to like 3.0.
And that's especially impossible.
Gain access to the higher standings, do you think that it's like missions where level 1 missions just suck for standings, and as you go up you can gain more and more?
Yeah, so it's going to speed up a lot once I get, now that I'm 1.0, because what I can do is, instead of having to like go to the wormhole and filament out and then wait 15 minutes per cycle, what I can do is I can go to a border system. I can clear, like, shoot an EDENCOM rat, shoot a drone rat if I can. You can shoot the drifter rats if they're fighting Triglavians or something. You can whore on them and leave, but there's no way you're going to be able to kill them because they actually lost a confessor to them and a sacrilege to them when I started, and they actually one-shot me from 60 kilometers away.
The drifter rats are ridiculous. They instantly lock.
on.
They hit like a truck. They are absurd in Podge Fun. So there's mechanics that control which rats spawn in a system too. Like the drifter rats spawn when there's a wormhole open to anarchists to wormhole space.
Yeah, it was the same problem that we were having with the war posts with the the minor victories and the final limbs, right? Because they were just instantly locking people, and people weren't able to get out because it was actually shown that mathematically that it was almost impossible for some of these ships to get out because of the way that the NPCs interacted with the server versus the client side issues. So it's basically the same governing mechanics with some of these drifter NPCs.
I do expect the drifters to get nerfed because right now the drifters in Podge Fun are absurd. They're like just absolutely absurd.
Yeah, they could like one-shot a Guardian or something with like 60k HP apparently.
Jeez.
If there's like free like a small pack on grid. So yeah, it is pretty ridiculous. But yeah, basically you kill an EDENCOM NPC, kill a drone NPC. Maybe if you want to risk it, you try to whore on a drifter NPC if it's fighting EDENCOM or Triglavians, and then you go to like the next system, then you kill an EDENCOM NPC and then a drone NPC, and then you take the wormhole out, so then you can use a filament to go to hopefully another border system area that you weren't in, because there's 6 border systems altogether. So the chance that you'll end up in a border system area that you weren't in previously is like 33% chance.
So Podge Fun is really a subway system for New Eden, isn't it?
Kind of, yeah. If you have the standing.
If you have the standing, which is why you're in there, Suitonia, right?
Yeah, because it's going to be like super duper convenient, basically, if you're doing like any kind of like solo roaming. I imagine even wormholers will probably want to get standings to them because it's also really convenient because you could just filament out of your wormhole system into Podge Fun and then gate or just even dock it, right?
Isn't this kind of like Greater Thera? Isn't this the same concept of?
It's. Like, I think it's less convenient than Thera, but it's got some similarities.
It's definitely got design similarities of Thera, but it, there definitely have been some in the wormhole community that have argued that it's actually very similar to Thera, and the fact that they haven't iterated on it, and it was just kind of meh, and that was it. But now that we've seen, CCP has rolled back a lot of changes that have made it much better, like not landing at almost 100 off the wormhole, like a DED site, essentially, and being able to kind of guess as to where the wormholes are going to spawn and what they do, and et cetera, et cetera. I think that's probably a little bit better. But circling back to, I think it's similar to Thera, but it's definitely got differences between it, for sure.
It's there that you can filament into from wherever you want, which is huge, right? Like that's the big point, the big selling point for me.
So I think it was a really good change to make it so you can reliably get into a specific system, but like I still think that I don't want to be friendly with the Triglavians, so I'm not going to grant this standing.
Well, this is funny. You'll like Vino Corlin's comment here. He says, "Not a subway, more like a sewer."
Yeah, I still think that there's just a lot of problems with the Podge Fun update, but that's like a whole show in and of itself.
Why do we have EDENCOM standings if there's nothing for EDENCOM to?
So don't even get me started. All right, so
yeah, I'm in the same boat you are.
So like they had this whole big 5-month event, and the EDENCOM side, which is, by the way, the side that won more systems, not a big deal or anything, gets absolutely nothing at the end. There's like nothing to do with EDENCOM standing. The only place now you can get DE to LP is the flashpoints that spawn in fortresses. There's no reward beyond the armor and the clothes that you get for the thing. It's just.
What's the joke? I fought for EDENCOM
and all I got was this lousy T-shirt. Like I saved 130 something systems, and all I got was this T-shirt, right? And then they released a tone deaf article on MMORPG.com where they basically said EDENCOM should have tried harder when we literally won more systems, right?
By far, right?
I mean, if you take away the Serenity systems, we won more by a little, right? Unless you're counting the minor if you're talking about the minor victories, it's by far. But if you're just talking about major victories, not on Serenity, we won more by a little, right? But still, no matter which way you slice it.
I hope CCP makes in 2 to 3 months time, makes EDENCOM Tech 2 ships or something that you need EDENCOM standings for, and everyone who grinded the Trig standings just instantly hates themselves.
Yeah, but at the end of the day is at I made a joke region for the EDENCOM systems it's all the fortresses. It's the 52, 53 fortresses. And instead of a triangle, it's shaped like a middle finger, and it's called Dingleven. And that's the EDENCOM region in my head. It's just there needs to be something for the other side of the whole event, or it goes back to the idea that CCP didn't expect organized EDENCOM players. They expected locals versus Triglavians, and then they expected the locals to just go back to what they were doing after their own system was invaded, and it's over.
I'm pretty sure CCP got the message that some people are unhappy about that, and it does seem unfair.
Sometimes it seems like that, but then that stuff like that article on the MMORPG.com that just
CCP Burger said that if EDENCOM wanted a different result, they should have fought harder, basically.
Yeah, and the in-game news kind of gave a hint that the minimum amount of systems that could be won is 21, and the max amount of systems that could have been won is 81, and it ended up being 27.
That's a win, because that's a lot less than 81 systems kidnapped by Triglavians would have been half the map. Well, no, it would have been half the map, but it would have been huge. Okay.
Yeah, it would have been amusing if the Triglavians won. Was it Bay? One of those systems? No,
it was Jark. It was Jark. It was, if they had won Jark, the Amar Empire would have been cut off from all other space. There'd be no continuous route from Jita to Amar, because Nyarja fell, and then if Jark had fallen, and Jark went Fortress. I was there for 13 hours straight, but Jark went Fortress, and if that had gone Liminality too, there'd be no route from Jita to Amar.
B's another connecting system, by the way. That's very important in that route. So if B had been lost too, when this
Bay couldn't have gone liminal. Bay is not the right type of star to go liminal. Okay. EDENCOM won Bay as a minor victory. Bay was not a yellow or a G5 yellow or a blue star, so Bay couldn't have turned liminal.
Yeah,
it was an important system. Yeah, it was an important system to win as a minor victory. It was probably the most important minor victory, but it couldn't have turned liminal.
Yeah, because if that went minor, then you would not be able to go from Jitter to Rens without changing characters, now I guess you could grind rogue drones to be positive to both, because there was an EDENCOM and a Triglavian system on the route, so you'd get killed by one or the other.
Yeah, we call that the red line or the blue line, again with the subway, right?
Yeah.
All right, one last thing before we go. We want to talk to you three, because you all participated in Twitch versus CCP. Also, Bjorn B out
Twitch
there.
Twitch versus Eve. CCP was in our fleet.
Oops, sorry. Twitch versus Eve, yeah. CCP was on your team. Also, Bjorn B out there was part of that. What was that like, you guys?
Twitch versus Eve 4, it was
what happened? Because what was it for people that didn't see it or participate in it?
So basically, it's an event that happens, a regular event. I want to say annually, but Twitch vs. Eve 3 was earlier this year, right? It was the same year.
Pretty random. So the first one was in April. The second one, I missed it. It must have been around April for the second year. The third one was actually 8 months ago. or something like that.
Twitch versus Eve 3 was this year still.
Yeah.
Twitch
It
versus
wasn't
Eve
too long
2
ago.
was the year before last, I think.
Yeah, I missed TVE too.
I went to 2, 3, and 4, and I FC'd in 3 and 4, right? But anyway, it's a open fleet, bunch of streamers, bunch of CCP, ISC, and GMs, all fleet up together, and we roam around. We start under 1 FC, and then we all go out, we die, and then we reform under the next FC. Everybody had an hour and 30 minutes allocated to them for fleet this year, so it was more structured than previous years, where you just kind of went until you died. But then everybody took turns taking the fleet out. This year there were 7 different FCs. I was able to make 5, but then after 7 hours of streaming, I went and got food. Right? It was a lot of fun. It's always a lot of fun. The comms are really friendly, and everybody's really nice. And a lot of times you get a big hectic fights that maybe you can't win, but they're fun.
Your fleet was awesome, by the way. I had fun.
Do you really think so? Like, I felt I didn't do that great, but because last year I did really Twitch vs Eve 3, I did really good with the Harbinger fleet, and this year I took a Hurricane fleet out, and it was really early for me because I'm used to roaming in U.S. time zone, and it was early EU time zone, so I kind of went to where I usually fight, like roadworks and stuff, but like nobody was there, so we went up a little bit and started bashing a Ferrolex Sino beacon to make something come out of it. And lo and behold, big fleet came out of it, and we got a couple kills in the whole thing, but went down pretty hard. And ISD Thalak is one of the ISDs, is the biggest troll in the world. Last event when I did the Harbinger fleet, he brought a Naglfire to the fleet. This year I do a Hurricane fleet, and he brings a goddamn Revelation. Like, he's just trolling me, and it's great.
So you all got to FC? Is that you all got to take turns FC?
Not everybody. There were.
They picked 7 FCs to do the event because I mean they can't do a 24-hour live event or to have every single streamer FC would be insane. So they pick a handful of pilots to FC, and they have them go out and do it. It ended up being about 10.5 hours or just under 12 hours. All 7 fleets were fantastic fun. I get to say that because I flew in all 7 of them. There aren't many people that were able to participate in all 7, but they were fantastic. They're fun. It's an opportunity for CCP and all the ISD pilots to interact and play the game, and get to fly and fight you guys, and for you guys to kill all your favorite streamers. And also, it's a really big event from a I don't know how to describe it, but there's no other place in gaming where all of the streamers can team up on one team and go fight everybody else. And it's a unique, awesome event it's fantastic. And I think the first one held a few Guinness World Records, and they've only gotten bigger since then. So yeah.
Suitonia, do you FC?
No, not really. I've never really FC'd before.
Yeah, you mostly do your stuff solo, right?
Yeah, or I fly in small gangs quite often too, but I'm not like FCing them. It's more like everyone is kind of FCing the fleet sort of thing.
So this year it was Leslie Lou, and then Bjorn, myself, Gregel, Varian, a special Karma fleet person, and CCP Aurora. Right? I think that's accurate.
That sounds right. Vorian fed the fleet into his friends 2 years ago.
No, because last year I dropped an apostle for him, and it got away in half. It got away in half hull or half armor, I think, with no cap in Tama, right?
Yeah. My carrier got out on that one and ended up dying for Chappie's birthday.
Oh, so we both dropped caps for him last year.
Yep, we sure did. And I not only dropped a cap last year, but I also spent my TVE 1 Chronos that I had for that fleet, and it died so fast it wasn't funny.
Awesome.
Oh, wow.
We got a couple more things we want to hit, actually. First, we want to make an announcement that directly after the show, in 10 minutes, Andrew Groen gets interviewed by the Hall of Echoes. So you'll see Talking in Stations talk with Andrew Groen again right after this in 10 minutes. We'll send you over there, or we'll tell you where it is in just a second. But we have a couple more things we want to hit just before we go. There's two things. One is, this will be for Elise, I think. Red Alliance switches sides and joins Goon Swarm. What's that mean to you just off the top of your head?
So Red Alliance and Goon Swarm have been like allies historically for a long time. So it's probably a nice nod there. It's important to know that I think Silent Dodger's back in charge of RA, and he and the Matane go way back. So that makes sense. RA did lose a bunch of members at the same time as they did that transition. But another big thing that happened today is Army of Mangoes, and this is probably going to be developing that we'll have to chat about more this week because I don't know too much about it. Mm-hmm. Army of Mangoes has just completely dropped out of the war.
Did they officially announce that? Because my impression was that they just are putting their umbrella back together. They're not necessarily out of the war.
I'm not sure. I guess it's developing, but I have a feeling that we'll be seeing a little bit less of them on the war front. Who knows on there? It was always a strained relationship between Army of Mangoes and Fraternity being together. So,
yeah, we had them on the show, the Sunday show, a few weeks back when the war started, and Noros told Fulcrum, yes, we are going to kill you, but not right now.
Yeah.
After the war, then we'll kill you. But that was pretty funny. But Billy's in chat and he's saying it's not true and he doesn't know where that's coming from.
Oh, okay. So apparently that's a horrible
I know
lie.
the Meta Show kept saying it was happening, but I was like, that's big news if it happens. So then I wrote Billy and he's like, nope, that's not the way it is. So I wouldn't.
Maybe it's a wishful thinking on the Imperium side. They've been kind of pushing for the cracks narrative for some time now.
Right. So we would both agree that would be a bigger story necessarily than Red Alliance joining Goon Swarm, which is the actual true story, because it doesn't seem like the Red Alliance is the fighting force that they were before. But it is nice as kind of a novelty that Red Swarm is back together because you have the French connection in there with Red Alliance and now Goon Swarm together again. And French Connection used to be, what were they called? The Federation.
Oh, they used to live in Tau Ceti Federation. They used to live in Declan. That's actually how the Goons got Declan to begin with. TCF gave it to them, but
I think it's such a great story. I'm not sure a lot of people know about it. We won't go over it now, but Tau Ceti basically taking a ruined Goon Swarm and giving them a place to grow and to recuperate. They saved Goon Swarm pretty much.
Yeah, and Red did the same thing too. So it's kind of neat in terms of like raw members moving over. Probably not that significant that RA swaps, but it does also drive it's actually really good for the Imperium because they get to say, hey, look, we have old friends coming back instead of in World War B, they had a lot of friends leaving. So now it's like everyone seems to be coming back. I know Mr. V came back for a little bit.
Yeah.
Like you have like names like Laz coming that were still back. So Red Alliance moving back it's not insignificant, but it's not like a huge thing. I think it's cool. I think it's good news for the Imperium on all fronts.
Yeah. Let's make sure that people understand that AOM is not leaving the war effort, according to Villy. Okay, so let's move off that and talk about...
Everybody is biased, though. It's true.
The last story I want to know about, Arsia, what's going on with the role players, EDENCOM and Triglavian war that's just starting up?
All right, so there's a war between Phoenix Naval Systems and Electus Matari have decked a holding corp for Convocation of Amphibians, which is the parent alliance to the Kybernauts Corp, which was obviously undeckable. And it started off with just PNS, Phoenix Naval Systems, bashing some of the structures in high sec. And then EM joined for the whole timer, and a lot of people from Kybernauts and other groups that had counterdecked, allied into the war, showed up, and there was on Friday there was 3 pretty large fights for high sec over a couple structures. The structures did repair, but for the 3 fights, we won the ISK war by quite wide margin, but they saved their structures. But for all 3 of the fights, I think they won the ISK war in the first fight, but we won on the second and the third fight ISK-wise, and the structures repaired on the first and second fight, and the third fight was after they were coming back from reinforcing a war headquarters shield timer. But there's some stuff going around. Apparently somebody is trying to take credit for hiring PNS or hiring EM, and any
Zenuria, can I say it? Zenuria is trying to take credit.
Zenuria has been claiming that he hired us to bash the COE structures, and he's kind of just a bridge troll. He's trying to sow discord among people who are pretty much fighting a war for RP reasons. The whole thing is because of specifically in character motivations about attacking Triglavians and doing damage to Triglavians who are, in the eyes of our characters, traitors to humanity. And it's not personal grudges. It's not a mercenary contract. That's all it is.
It's finishing the story that the CCB started in a way, right?
Well, you mentioned something that's really interesting.
Here's the thing.
Yeah.
We are unhappy with Pochven. We were happy with contesting the Triglavians and being an enemy to the Triglavians. We're going to continue our story regardless of the new content doing whatever it does over there. Because we like fighting the Triglavian players. We like being the heroes of the various empires. We like our established RP for our factions, and we like having enemies that we have motivations to shoot as opposed to just shooting anybody.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, that's what I was going to prompt you to talk about, is how you guys have taken matters into your own hands to continue the war against Triglavians. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, in general, it's not like the game mechanics are punishing the players who help the Triglavians. Not the players, but anybody who helped the Triglavians. Standings-wise, you can have good Triglavian standing, bad EDENCOM standing. And outside of a few minor victory systems that a fair amount of minor victory systems that you have to watch out for, it's not like you're not being cut off from the secure commerce commission markets. You're not being cut off of using stations and services in the empires that you attacked. You didn't lose any faction standing. The entire reason EDENCOM exists as a faction was so players didn't lose the empire standing and access to the various empire space. So you don't lose Caldari standing, you lose EDENCOM standing, and then you don't get kicked out of JITA.
Oh, got it. Well, that's really cool. All right. So thanks for giving us the lowdown. And this is a continuing and evolving situation, right?
Yeah, no, it's the first week of the war, right? And it's kind of heated up because a lot of groups joined in and a lot of people piled into the other side.
Got involved. Yeah.
What was that?
Noir got involved?
Yeah, Noir decked us, so that's we only saw a few of them at timers, but that was fun to see. It was the Einstein-Rosen Brigade decked us. A lot of the players from the Chironauts Corp went over to the Shell Corp for the COE, and that's kind of really what we wanted. We wanted them to get out of the undeckable Corp and into the deckable Corp, and that's exactly what we saw. And so that was really positive. We kind of were jerks at the end because we dread bombed them when they were coming back from the shield timer in the high sec island. But yeah, it's just an escalating war that is in its infancy.
Great. Okay.
And it's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. So we're going to wrap up the show now, and want to thank everybody. Oh, one more thing. Suitonia, when you were putting your arm up there, you looked like you're on a subway. You were stretching. That was hilarious. I kept thinking Subway when you did that. That's what gave me the idea of we were talking about trig space.
Yes, the Pochfin subway.
Yeah, I'm sure you were just stretching because it's 2 hours sitting in a chair works on you. Suitonia, real quick, what are you up to now? You're grinding up Triglavian stuff, and what are your plans after that?
Hopefully, I want to have a lot of fun with the ESS update when it comes out, experimenting with solo PvP and doing some small gang stuff.
Right. So you're going to do your own thing, or are you going to join Bjorn B's Bandit Corporation? Is that what they're called? Bandits?
Bank robbers.
Bank robber. Yeah. Stick them up. Okay. Will you be doing your own thing?
I probably won't leave Volta.
Oh, that's right. You're in Volta. What are you going to do, Hateless?
I'm probably going to throw an ult in there because that's awesome as to what that is. But I'm probably going to be leading my corp into that as well. But that's huge incentive for me to go play in that.
Yeah, we talked about them earlier in the show, but the Bank Robbers Corporation, led by Bjorn B, going into nullsec, stealing ESS money, basically holding up the banks in the West. All right. Listen, thanks everyone for joining us today. We are not going to rate anyone because we want you to go right now to YouTube and watch Andrew Groen and our very own Who's a Fish talk about EVE Online and the history and some of the stuff that's just now beginning in EVE Echoes and how that history is just now getting off the ground and going. So thanks everyone, and have a happy November. We're going to say happy Halloween, but that was yesterday. We will see you next time on Talking in Stations.